All right. Good morning. Good afternoon. Happy Sunday, good people. Crystal, happy Sunday. So we are a couple of minutes late because Jewel was having technical difficulties, but I figured it out. So here we are. Here we are. Hello, hello. Hi, Evelyn. Hi, Sandra. WLJ. Happy Sunday to you, everybody. I see y'all already. Kitty. Okay, so let me do my intro. We're gonna get started because we've got a good conversation happening this morning. Happy that you all have joined. Y'all should be proud of me again. I got another guest. Hey, so let's do this. As I introduce myself, I am Jewel Pearson. I introduce myself and say I built a kind of fancy tiny house in 2015 because I don't believe that you have to give up luxury to go tiny. And since that time, I have shared my journey to hopefully inspire others who are interested in the movement. I do offer coaching and consultation so that you can be in this movement, so you can transform your home, your life, all the things. And once this video is live, you will find links to schedule with me to get on my calendar in the video description below. And as I'm doing all of this, I like to serve up a lot of representation along the way. I want us to see ourselves in this movement. I want us to be in the movement. I want us to understand the value of the movement, all of those things. So if you find this information helpful, as Crystal has already let y'all know, please like it, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notifications so that you'll know when we're going live over here. And so I do have a guest, my guest this morning, L.T. Roberson. L.T., please introduce yourself to um, my listeners, my guest, other guest.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. I'm LT. I'm a digital nomad and lifestyle and business optimization coach. I help people to design a life that they love and transform organizations for efficiency and effectiveness. I provide concierge style career and lifestyle coaching to individuals and for organizations. I provide a high touch consulting services. So think fractional chief of staff, like project and program management, talent, HR, organizational development, that type of thing. I'm also the creator of the Calibration Suite, which is a high impact leadership program. And it's designed to help leaders fine tune how they think, how they prioritize, and execute in complex environments. So, really happy to be here with you guys today. I've worked in people development for about 15 years. And so that's what brings me here to connect with you all and talk about things that we experience.
All right. Thank you for that introduction. In today's conversation, and I had an opportunity to connect earlier in the week to kind of sync on where we thought this conversation would be so beneficial and of value to the audience, and also um, more into her background. We were able to connect. So, LT and I met early this year when I went on an excursion and did a thing that I've not publicly I'll talk about over here in case the man is but I did a thing and there was a group of us that did a thing and you follow Stephanie, you know about the thing. If you follow El, you know about the thing. You just if unless you know me personally, or kind of pay attention, I haven't discussed the thing, but I did the thing. So anyway, that is we first connected. We had a fabulous time, and so wanted to reconnect and have an opportunity to share some information, some of this goodness with the community. So the our subject today, stop hesitating. There's risk in reward. It is something that I speak about a lot, especially within the tiny house movement, within my involvement in the movement, as I share my journey of 2012, 2013, deciding that I was going to build a tiny house at a time when it wasn't a thing like it is now. And most folks just really thought that I was crazy. People wanted to know if I was having hardship, did I need somewhere to stay? And I knew I had a plan a long-term plan. And I have shared in the 10 plus years that I have been in the movement now, there was risk involved. There's still risk involved because tiny houses on wheels aren't technically legal. And so there's the opportunity at any point that I might have to move my home if the man should get in my business. But there has been so much reward in these 10 plus years. And the reward in building this community, the reward in you all joining every Sunday to hear from someone like LT, that is part of the reward. The personal reward for me, as I've shared about my home, actually saving my life right now from the perspective of my expenses and my lifestyle. And there continues to be risk, but the reward is so much greater. And that's what we want to talk about because so many people will see the risk and retreat because of fear, because of so many things. And sometimes we just have to push through that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So, LT, you in your introduction, okay, so Crystal is asking LT if you're wearing a mic. Something is rubbing up against the mic.
John, let me tuck some of this hair and see if maybe
Oh,
this is
okay.
doing it.
I knew I thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Crystal.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, so LT, oh, thank you, somebody. You described yourself as a digital nomad, which
Yeah,
in of itself is breaking a lot of norms, especially for Black and brown folks.
yeah.
What was the first rule you had to unlearn to step into that life?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think the first rule that I had to unlearn um, was thinking that things had to go a particular way.
Mm,
Um, so as we kind of go through this conversation, I know Jewel likes notes and LT likes notes too. So one of my notes that I thought about before sitting down with you all today is how we really need to stop seeing everything as permanent. And in fact, even seeing everything as long term. That was one of the first things that I kind of had to release, right? I had to release it in terms of my living arrangements. I had to release it in terms of what I thought about work. I had to release it in terms of even what I thought about education. And so kind of early on, I really started looking at work. Someone said previously on another live, they were talking about how they look at all of their jobs almost as contracts. Like it's not a contract, they're a W 2 employee, but they look at everything as a contract, as something that's temporary, right? And that's really, I think, where it started for me. I looked at every job as okay, I'm gonna, be here, show up. I like to do good work, right? And so I'm going to do that for whatever time period that I'm here. And that might be a year, it might be 5 years. I don't know what that's going to be, but it's not permanent. Whatever it is, there's a start and an end to it. And so that was something that I carried into my transition to being a digital nomad. I started to kind of look at how I was living life and what I wanted more of. It
mhm.
wasn't that I was necessarily lacking anything. It was that I wanted more of something else that I didn't quite have yet. And so, what could I change? What could I do differently to get closer to it?
So letting go of the permanence.
Yeah,
Um,
just that concept, right? Because before we used to have a little bit, you could bet on things being a bit more long term. You could bet on things being a bit more permanent,
mm,
right? But I want to say over the last 15 years, we've seen that change in every single segment of the economy, right? We've seen it change politically, we've seen it change with education, we've seen it change in terms of living conditions, right? So, if you were a homeowner, or what that even looked like, maybe if you were trying to become a homeowner, we've seen it with the job market, right? We start with the pandemic. So, the concept that things are firm in any way, shape, or form is just not true anymore.
So we're going to talk about that a little bit deeper later in the conversation because I've got some additional questions for you around not seeing stuff as permanent. But for in this place of the conversation right now, when we think about how so many of us, especially Black women, are taught to stick to the script. And now you're saying everything's not things aren't permanent, which we know it's not. But for
Right.
so many of us, we're taught to stick to the script. And which is why we often have challenges pivoting because things are pivoting around us, but we've been
Right.
taught to stick to
To
the
be steady.
and
Yeah.
be steady. What
Hmm.
do you say? What advice do you have for someone who is afraid to let go of that traditional path, even when their spirit is their energy is craving something else, but they're scared to let go of traditional? What are some thoughts that you have for somebody like that?
Yeah, I would say the thing that I hold on to and the thing that we're supposed to hold on to um, are your values. Your values are what's supposed to be your anchor, right? Not the particular situation, not the way that something is currently set up, because all of that's circumstantial. And that's why the first thought has to be to understand that things are not permanent, and
Mhm.
sometimes they're not even long term, right? And so the thing that you are holding on to, the thing that is steady for you, are your values. And so I would say make sure that whatever you're clutching onto is anchored in your values. Because sometimes we do have things that we have to hold on to amidst what's kind of going on around us. But you should have clarity in what those things specifically are because they are anchored in your values. And so if you find in your reflection that, oh, I'm actually holding on to a particular concept, I'm holding on to a belief that's not tied to my values, I'm holding on to something that I was told, right, or instructed to do in a particular way. But now that I think about it, I'm actually not sure why I'm doing it this way, right? I'm not sure why I won't challenge it. Then that's your first inkling that it is time to do something different. Circumstances are supposed to look different, but you can maintain your values, and that becomes your foundation, and that becomes your steadiness, right? Your anchor in kind of a changing environment.
And that kind of that mentality is a lot of as I talk about downsizing here, as relative to physical space. I always speak to downsizing not necessarily just being relative to physical space. I talk about it being downsizing and decluttering because I'm not always talking about downsizing, but decluttering. When I speak
Mhm.
about that, I always share that it is not always the physical stuff that has to be decluttered, as you were just talking about. Sometimes, and I say it in terms of people, places, and things.
Yeah.
Um, and because it's not just I need to get rid of 5 lamps. It is sometimes I need to get out of this circle, this relationship, this area, people, places, and things. That's the hard part for a lot of people because this has been the steady, this has been the constant, this is what you know. Um in your if you're able to share what have been and so like I consider those like tiny house moments, the
Mhm.
decluttering, but again it's people,
Yeah.
places, and things and it applies outside of a tiny house. What have been some of those seasons of clearing space for you to that you've had to go through to make room for what's next?
Yeah. It's been all of the above, right? So, um, people, I have not complicated thoughts, but I think complex thoughts as it relates to this.
Okay.
Because I do believe that you need to be a person who can let things go. And by things, right, people, places, and things.
Mhm.
You need to know and you need to have a very clear sense of when time is up.
Mm-hmm.
So time is up, at that job. Time is up, in a particular relationship. And I don't mean romantic relationships. I mean literally just people you relate to, right? Whether that's a friendship, a network in a particular way. You need to be very keen on when it is time for those things to shift. So the people aspect has been something that I have watched change over the course of my life multiple times.
Right.
And it's so funny. As I said before I started doing this, there were different phases where there were people who I expected would be around that, like, fast forward to today, they're not.
Mm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like I know something's coming because I'm losing people that I didn't anticipate. Like there were just certain people that I said, oh no, this is us, like for now until forever. And it was just so interesting because a lot of times it just happened out of nowhere, you know. And so I knew that was for me the people thing shifting, or changing kind of circles, right? Changing relationships. It's a really, really big cue for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the places, I'll do that in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Things, I'll do that in a heartbeat, right? But my people, I'm very, as my business says, pretty particular. I'm very particular about my humans. And I keep, a very small subset, as I'm naturally an introvert, not shy, but introverted in terms
Same.
of I like to spend my energy with a small subset of people.
Same.
And
Mm.
so once I get my people, once I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
we together.
We
This
locked
is us. You're
in.
mine. Yes. And I've always been that way. I'm just wired like that. And so when I have people that I hold, and my relationships are very important to me. And so when I have people that I hold in that regard, and it changes, right? And it changes in a major way, I'm like, oh, something's coming. Something's coming. And for whatever reason, they just can't be a part of, this transition. And so
Yeah.
the people one is big for me. But the things, I will tell you this, because your girl loves to shop. I've always been that way. So the things are definitely a part of it too. And while I didn't transition to a tiny house, I did two major shifts. One was moving from Richmond, Virginia to Orlando, Florida. So I had to go through this entire process of, getting rid of stuff, kind of thinking about what was important. And when I made that shift, I didn't want to take anything that was not um, useful or meaningful. Those were kind of my two categories.
Mm-hmm.
I remember getting rid of so many bags, and I mean like garbage bags of clothes and shoes and just stuff, like stuff that I gave away. It was in good condition, but I just decided it didn't belong with me in this next transition. And so, likewise, when I became a digital nomad, I had already lived in Orlando for over 5 years at that point. And
Okay.
so I had 5 years, of
More
new stuff,
right.
right? And granted, I had been intentional, but I also had not thought that I was going to become a digital nomad,
Okay.
right? And so I shifted from this sort of permanence, right, of living nice apartment, luxury apartment, high rise, right in the middle of downtown Orlando, all of the nice things that you kind of think about if that's your thing, like if apartment living is your thing, it had it. And so I set my place up in a way that was comfortable for me to be there. All my plants that I loved and named each one of them, and just stuff. And I was so funny. I had multiple closets, but two of them were large walk-in closets, and so I had a section on my shelves in one of my closets that was just all for mini purses. They were for all just cute
Okay.
little small purses because I like to collect those. That's my thing, right? And so thinking about what all of that looked like. So I'm getting, emails about sales, and I'm like, oh, no more buying mini purses for now. First of all, you have enough, but second of all, you're getting ready to do this thing. And so as I kind of talk about, what it looks like to make that transition, but also being in alignment with my values, that meant shifting how I was spending my money. That meant shifting how I was spending my time, right? And it meant either getting rid of stuff or selling stuff, right? And in my case, there were a number of things that I put in storage. So I still have a storage
Okay.
unit right now. But I got rid of a lot. I mean, even down to the last day. The last day I was trying to find places to like donate things, you know.
Okay.
So that was my sort of initial experience into becoming a digital nomad.
Gotcha. One of the things that I want to mention from the first part of this conversation where you were talking about people in my workshops, and as I talk about the building of a tiny house, I always talk about how there's a quote that I share within my workshops that is so relevant to the process of a tiny house, and where it's not just about the home, but it says whatever good things we build end up building us.
Mhm.
And going into my process, just like you said, people started shifting around me. People that I would have said, like you said, are solids, people who, day ones been there. And sometimes those people it will even be family.
Yeah.
And it was unexpected to me. But what happens is sometimes as you're changing, people can't adjust to your change. It's not their change, it's your change, but they can't adjust to your change. And so when that starts happening, as you were kind of saying, sometimes it makes you question as to whether what you're doing is the right direction, because these people are having these shifts and you're losing people, and things are changing. And that sometimes is that risk in the reward, because you have to understand that you need to trust the process because it's going to happen. And
Mhm.
I didn't know that it was going to happen, but in my workshops, I share it's going to happen. And the better prepared you are when it starts happening, because you've already been warned it's going to happen. And it's some day one that's been there for 150 years, and
Yeah.
that starts shifting, you have a better opportunity to understand, oh, I knew this was going to happen. There
Yeah,
might not.
well, because that's the nature of change, right?
Yeah,
That is the nature of doing anything. You should anticipate that something will shift. And
absolutely.
that's kind of the mindset that I move around the world with. I literally just look for what's changing next, right? Like what's shifting next. And not in a negative or anxiety related way. It's
Right.
just understanding that change is literally the nature
Constant.
of the
It's
world.
constant.
And
Absolutely.
so you should anticipate, right, that things will not look the exact same way sort of day to day or year to year. And Jewel, I think as you said, it's our change. But I think it's also other people's change. Like even if they don't realize they are changing, they are actively deciding what they want to be in proximity to, right? So I might be the thing that starts it, right? Me doing this, me moving. I mean, me moving out of state, that shifted a lot of relationships,
Yeah.
And so I might be the thing that starts it, but then people have an opportunity to respond. And
Right.
so what we then see is the response, and that response usually is a change from something that we thought, a way that we thought things would have gone.
I think it's also important, Evelyn just said in it, sometimes it won't feel good. No, and that's part of the point I was making. Like it can sometimes make you reconsider whether the direction you're going in is the right direction, or do I want to stay back here where it's been comfortable? And you have to know sometimes there's risk and reward, and sometimes you just have to push through that. So absolutely. You
And my answer is always no, which is the funny part. I see it as I see the changes, the shifts, what sometimes feels as loss, right? As some version of grief. I see
Yeah.
that as part of the process.
Hmm.
And so when it occurs, my instinct is, okay, now let's shift into, making sure that I'm taking care of myself. Let's shift into thinking about, okay, what can I have more of in the future? And I just go through it. So I never, my response is never, oh, I don't like that people are responding this way. Let me not. My response is, okay, you're responding that way. I don't like how this feels. And also, I'm going forward. And that is almost what people have to, if you don't have that, you have to develop it,
Yes.
because otherwise you will end up making decisions based on somebody else's comfort zone,
Mhm.
based on somebody else's perspective and experience. And
Right.
it goes back to what you said earlier, Jewel, which was sometimes like people will have you thinking that you're crazy, but you have a vision. You have something that sometimes you see that nobody else can see. And
Mhm.
it's not going to make
For
sense
them.
to anyone else. Right. It's not for them. They weren't supposed to be the person going first, right? They were supposed to learn something from you going first. And so you have to keep going, and follow the vision that you have in front of you, which is why I talk so much about clarity and alignment and decision making. You have to have those things in their proper place so that you know how to move forward. Because you will have things that make you feel uncomfortable about moving forward, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't.
Right. That um a minute ago you mentioned the anxiety. We know in that stop hesitating piece of it, we have to act with urgency, but not from anxiety,
Yes.
from a place of honoring yourself. What are some key thoughts, tips that you would share on how we move from, because when we're operating from that anxiety or from not honoring ourselves, that's like a place of self-neglect. How do we move from that place of self-neglect to self-priority, where we're moving fast but not anxious, but we're prioritizing what and honoring ourselves in this process?
Yeah, I see that experience as often when people hesitate, particularly for long periods of time. Sometimes, hesitation it's quick, right? And so I'm not really talking about that, but sometimes when people hesitate and it's for longer periods of time, that's a sign that clarity and alignment are missing, because they're more focused on a concern, more focused on a fear,
Right.
right? And they haven't anchored in anything yet.
Mhm.
Um, because really, if you had a clear path, right, and your goals were aligned, and when I say goals are aligned, I mean how you spend your time and energy, then you would already be acting toward the life that you want. There wouldn't really be anything to hesitate on because you'd already be doing it. And so, as we kind of think about what does it mean, right, to um, when we have this experience and we tell people, okay, well, we don't want you to hesitate, what it actually means is really what I started saying at the beginning of this, which is you need to anchor in your values, right? Your goals then should be tied to your values. The alignment then comes from the fact that what you are working on, right, is connected to and anchored in a thing that is so important to you that you are not willing to give it up. Um, I remember some months ago, I was asleep and I had a dream, and I'm not really a person who like dreams anything important. Like I just have regular little silly, dreams. But this particular dream was very interesting because I remember in the dream going, I was talking to somebody, and I don't know who the person was, but they were saying something, and immediately my spirit was like, mm, no. And that's even interesting to me because I typically only have that response when I'm awake. But in the dream, I'm sorry, my light went out, so I know it got a little dark in here. But in the dream, and I'm gonna pick up my phone so I can read this to you clearly because I woke up and I wrote down the notes. And so in the dream, I remember thinking after they said whatever they said that rubbed me wrong, I what came to me was, what is your peace worth to you?
Mm.
And then I just kept talking. And so I said, what is your peace worth to you? What is your clarity worth to you? What is your well being worth to you? What is your wholeness worth to you? Because your mind, what is your mind, heart, and soul worth to you? Because you are not you without your mind, heart, and soul intact. And so I think so much about how the things that we want and desire. I think so much about how we have these dreams and just things that we want to get close to that somehow we give up, you know, and we give up because sometimes life is tough. We give up because sometimes, right, there are relationships that end, and that's painful for us. But oftentimes we also give up because we have not anchored in anything. We're not firm in anything. And so I propose the question to people, I take a reflective practice standpoint in my coaching. And so I want people to think about, what is this thing worth to you? And for me, becoming a digital nomad meant freedom, right? That was a value that I could anchor in. And so it was worth it to me to give up some of the things that at one point I wanted, enjoyed, had it, loved it, might get it again sometime in the future. But at this time, it was not worth it to me to maintain, having the apartment or having this particular thing. I decided that the freedom was more important. I decided that I wanted to, be more connected and be more curious about the world and see the world more. I'm talking to you guys today from Mexico City. So I know I talked about Richmond and I talked about Florida, but I'm not in either one of those places as much as I love them both. But there is something that you have to ask yourself: what are the things that you value worth to you? And then that's how you use that to face what the challenge is. You use that to face what the fear might be or what the concern might be.
Yeah. Those are and that kind of answers my next question was going to be what are things that help you stay decisive and in motion when fear or uncertainty shows up? And so those are the answers right there. Read
And I
those.
and I would add that, and I would add to it. Um, I would add to that. For me, I spend a lot of time in quiet and in prayer.
Mm,
Even before I got on the live today, I was in church this morning, virtually, online at a distance. But I spend a lot of time, I talk about values. And so I spend a lot of time trying to, not trying to, but I think actively engaging with my thoughts on things. It's metacognition, right? Thinking about your thinking.
absolutely.
And so I spend a lot of time with that. I spend a lot of time reflecting on experiences, and not in a way, again, not in a negative way, but reflecting on, okay, this is what happened. I didn't like it for these reasons. I did appreciate it for, these other reasons. What am I carrying forward? And so I would say that quiet time, and for me, that also includes prayer. So I mean, literal solitude. I mean, literally nothing going on. There's no music, nobody's moving around. I just want to hear the air moving around. You
Hmm.
know, and then spending time in my devotions and spending time, in prayer.
Hmm.
That is a really big thing because um, I believe that part of what we find is important to us in terms of our values, that's coming from us somewhere. And for me, that's coming from somewhere in my prayer time, something that God has already put in me. It's not me having to find it externally, and quite often we have this, as humans, we kind of look externally for something that God has already put in us. It's
Hmm.
already there. And
But if you're not
so
quiet and still, you won't
if
hear
you're,
it.
you won't hear it. You won't hear it because it's the still small voice, right? You'll miss it, or you'll think it's something else, or you will hear it, but that um, I think about that kind of like the parable where it talks about sowing seed on different types of ground. And there was one of those where it sowed seed, the ground was okay, but it had thorns. And so the thorns came up and choked it. And so I think about fear like that. I
Mm,
think about how if you don't have that in check, right, the thorns, the weeds will come up and choke this thing that actually you did hear. Actually, you did hear clearly,
mhm,
right? But now it's been snatched away, right, because of the ground that it's been sown into. And so I think a lot about that. And I do actively on a regular basis, um, challenge kind of what the concept of fear is and how it's allowed to operate within my sphere, which is not much. Just
Mm-hmm.
not much.
Mm-hmm.
It's not permitted to do much.
What's something that you can think about that you maybe once hesitated about, but now you can't imagine your life without?
Hmm, that's a really good question. Jewel, I'm going to say that I'm actually not sure, and I don't know that I can think of it.
Okay. That's
And what you say?
I said that's fair.
It's fair. I'm going to say I'm not sure, and that is because the lesson that I learned very early was about fear, and it was about really not letting it drive is what I say, right? Like fear is a very natural and human experience. However, you don't have to let it drive. It might be in the car, right? It might be in the trunk, but it doesn't take the driver's wheel.
Mhm.
And that was a thing early for me, and I'm talking childhood. I was like, okay, this is normal. I don't like it, but it was almost, I talk about people watching and not just in a very passive way. I really people watch behaviors and then outcomes, right? Different connections to that from childhood to now. And the common denominator that I saw was hesitation, and fear. And fear being a very normal, very relatable thing, I still saw it as something you could move through,
Mm.
right? That the fear would be there, but you could keep going. It didn't have to stop you. And so I can't think of something really that I did that with because I would often recognize it and I didn't like it being there. So I would do it anyway. I would just do it. I would just do it. I mean, even down to like adventures and stuff. I'm not a great swimmer, but it's so funny. You wouldn't know because I do a lot of random things in water. Like the first time I went to Mexico, which was years ago, I went to Playa del Carmen and I did this little excursion where you go to a cenote, but the one that we went to had these stairs and like a cliff
Mhm.
over top of the cenote. And so I jumped into the cenote from the cliff. Now, I already said I'm not a great swimmer, and I was a worse swimmer when I did it.
Note. I've always wondered that.
I have the video from it and everything. I don't think it's still on my Instagram. I think I took it down, but there's a video of me like jumping into the cenote, and that was just what I did. And I take this practice of my birthday is coming up, and so one of the ways that I put into practice regularly challenging fear was I would start my year, which is my birthday. I start my my year by doing something that challenges fear, by doing something new or different. And so this time it was the cenote thing. I've gone skydiving before. That was a long time ago, but I went skydiving.
It's a
Um,
beautiful experience.
oh, it was fantastic. And do you know what happened that I didn't expect? I
Hmm.
expected that I would um, be afraid at some point, right? Like you just anticipate, right? That is a normal, natural thing to do. Do you know I sat up there on that plane and looked out the window just
Oh, wait, wait.
smiling?
Let me go back. I'm lying. I didn't do skydiving. I did the
Paraglider?
yes.
Oh,
Let
okay.
let me not lie. I don't want to lie. Go. So I take that back. Go ahead.
Okay. But I was on the plane, so they take you up in this little small plane. And I'm thrilled. I'm like, okay, okay, you're gonna get nervous. It's part of the process, okay? And I kept waiting for it. I mean, I just kept waiting for it. I was doing almost like body scans, and I was looking for where it might present right in my body, where the fear might be. Just anticipating that it would come, and I'll breathe through it, and then we're gonna jump off this plane, right? But I'm looking out the window the whole time, y'all. I was so happy to be up in the sky. I was so excited, just staring out the window like this. And I never, the entire time, I made it up in the air. We jumped off the plane, back on the ground. Never. not 1 ounce of fear. Now, when I think about it now, I'm like, ooh.
Right. Right. In hindsight sometimes. Yeah.
Right, right. But that's the funny thing about fear, right? Sometimes it's there when you're like, why are you here? And then sometimes it's not there, and you're like, wait, well, where are you? You know.
Right. Right. Um, so I want to come back to the earlier piece of stop seeing everything as permanent or long term. So
Mhm,
you shared with us like the big shifts that you've made, changing jobs, changing cities, in your way of living.
mhm,
Um, when I talk about building my tiny house, my thing, I found this image because I always talk about knowing your why and how important that is to know your why up front. And I found this image of a tiny house and it said, because I want to live in no freedom. And that is my why. And as I was researching in my notebook, I printed that out, and that became my like, mantra for what I was doing and why I was doing all of these things. And it is the overarching theme for why I'm doing this, because I want to live in no freedom, and it has offered me that.
mhm.
How for you in letting go of some of that permanence, how did that open up freedom for you?
So you kind of talked a little bit about your why, and I talked about how freedom is a value for me. One of the other kind of subtext of that, something else that I have written down in my phone, is that I'm not willing to go to the grave with good enough.
Mm,
And so I think about that. I initially was very much so a person that, like, I thought about work from 12, 13, right? I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get this type of job. And, I very much so had it mapped out. And I wanted a lot of structure. I wanted a lot of routine for a while. And at some point that just changed. At some point I became bored with it. I became disinterested in it, and it didn't feel big enough. It didn't feel like I was I was kind of stretching to the limits of who I am. I
okay.
didn't see anything wrong with the thing itself, so it wasn't a judgment. It was recognizing that what I thought I wanted to do wasn't really all I wanted to do. It was part of the story, but it wasn't the entire way that it was supposed to look. And so freedom for me looked like increasing my options.
Okay.
And so coming out of that kind of structure of, you know, you work this full-time job, which was not my original plan. We might get to that or we might not, but so I came out of the structure of working a, full-time W-2 job, and I came out of the structure of, the luxury apartment to become a digital nomad because I wanted to see more of the world. I had always loved travel, even though I didn't do much of it. But I would like watch documentaries, and I always listened very intently to other people's stories and always had plans, right? We always have these grand plans that we're going to use our PTO for, we're going to go this place or that place.
Mhm.
And sometimes we don't do that, right?
Mhm.
And then we spend years not doing that. And then time just keeps passing you by. And I just didn't want to go any further with that. I was not willing to go any further.
I love that. Um, when we use the word risk, the risk and reward, oftentimes people will confuse risk for danger.
Mhm.
Um, and I think a lot of times it's confused with danger because the person might not trust themselves completely.
Yeah.
How did you learn to trust your own decision making, especially as you've been choosing this non-traditional path? Or
Yeah.
have you always just trusted yourself?
I don't know if I say always, but early. I can say I trusted myself early. That was because I think it came from multiple places. If you all have watched any of my other videos before, you have heard me probably talk about my mom, and my mom is a really big component of that.
Okay.
And so for you all, it may not be a mother, it might just be another relationship. But my mom, for me, was the person who very early let me practice decision making. Very early, and I'm not talking about like small stuff like, oh, where are you, what clothes are you gonna wear, what outfit are you putting on today. And granted, that is a way that you do start children, but I remember being able to um, see, fourth grade, she taught at a private school. And so because she taught at a private school, she was like, no, you're going to go to the private school because I teach at the private school, right? So,
Okay.
one of the benefits quite often is, if you teach at a school, sometimes you get a reduced rate, right, of
Right.
reduced tuition. And so she was like, you're going to do this for this year, but she only did it for that. She did it for that 1 year. And then I think she stayed for maybe another 1 or 2 years. But after fourth grade, she asked me, right? So she's okay, you've been here for a year, you've had a chance to see it, you've had a chance to experience it. Do you want to stay or will you go back to public school? And so very early, I kind of thought about the pros and cons, of that experience. That same thing actually ended up happening seventh and eighth grade.
Okay.
And so she came and got me. This is like the most dramatic story, but I guess I was cutting up a little. I was doing a little too much to her liking.
Okay.
So she was working at a private school, and sis came and got my records at the school and just took me out. So when
Oh,
I talk about being action oriented, I have a mother who has demonstrated that. And she said, no, I don't like it. You coming over here. And so I went to private school for seventh and eighth grade. And eighth grade, maybe toward the middle of the school year, she said, okay, you got what you needed. And so do you want to stay in private school? Because I was like speeding through work, like I'm finishing work early because it's like a self-directed program. And so I could have graduated early essentially if I stayed at the private school. So she said, hey, you get to make the decision. Right. And so very early on, I had opportunities like that to really think through what is the impact of what I'm doing, and what I may or may not want to do. So she is certainly a factor in my ability to do that. The other part of that is being a person who is willing to kind of think through the messiness of it.
okay.
One of the things I think we see often, and Jewel, I'm sure you see this with coaching as well. What I see with coaching is sometimes people don't want to get into the mess of it.
And it's
They,
hard work. Yeah, it's hard work.
it's hard work. It's hard
Ugly.
work. Yeah, and very personal
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
right? And so you have to be willing to get into the messiness of it. I mean, I sat in that car. We were on the way to church one day, and I remember my mother looking over at me like, she said, hey, you okay? You okay over there? I was, yeah, she said, okay, you look like you've been thinking hard, it's okay. Like you'll make a good decision. But it was like early on, I had to really sit with the weight of it, and understanding that decision. And I think that's something that helped me later to just understand that that's just a part of the experience.
Mhm.
And so we have to understand that some of these things, right, as we talk about risk and reward, I understood even with those two small things, right? And later deciding, about jobs, deciding how long I was going to be somewhere. Um, Another really great example, the way that people often experience risk and danger is creating boundaries in the work environment,
Mhm.
right? And so, oh, am I going to stay late because it seems like everybody expects me to? Am I going to show up early? Am I not going to use my PTO, right? Because it seems like, oh, well, we have this project or whatever coming up. Very early on, and one of the things that is still repeated even now, I have to think about if I'm interpreting this as danger, why,
Mm. Mhm.
right? The answer is always in the why. It's always in the details of it. And it's very similar to what we talked about, Jewel, what you and I kind of got into which was anchoring your decisions in your values, because that is how you build trust with yourself.
Hmm.
The more often you make decisions that are true to you and
Absolutely.
aligned in what you believe in, right? That's going to help to build your self confidence in yourself, because it's reducing cognitive dissonance. And so cognitive dissonance is almost is this experience of, I think one way, but then I behave another, right? And so then there's some distance between how you're thinking and how you're behaving or how you're living. And so the more often you can say, family's a priority to me, and therefore the decisions I make tend to prioritize my family, right? Or well-being is important to me, and so the decisions I make prioritize my well-being, right? Taking my PTO, going for the walk, right? Getting the personal trainer, if that's what you said you were going to do, whatever that is, making decisions and taking action that is aligned to how you believe yourself to be, that's going to build your trust. And so I believe myself to be a person who is capable of doing difficult things. I believe myself to be a highly intelligent person. I believe myself to be an incredibly capable person. And so I said, if I'm not demonstrating that, if I'm not taking risks and taking actions that show, yeah, I'm capable of doing this. Yeah, I can figure this out. Yes, I can, do something that's challenging or different. And frankly, if I make one decision and I don't like it, I can make another. And
Mm.
so trusting myself to do that, but it's through that experience of living my raps. I try in every way, shape, and form to be exactly who I say I am. And so I ensure that as much as I can, my life demonstrates that I'm that.
Two things out of there I want to reiterate. One, I always say you get to dream a new dream, even if you take the risk and it wasn't what you expected, or it the time has expired. You get to do something else. It's not
Mhm.
you have to stick with this one thing and that's the end of it. So that's one thing I want to call back out. And then the other piece of what you said in aligning, anchoring in your values and making decisions based on who you are, you have to spend the work to get to know who you are. That goes back into the messiness of the hard work in not just knowing yourself at the surface level or who people think you are, but really at that deep level, who are you? And that's what you anchor to, not the person that you are because of these circumstances or the circle around you. In those quiet times when you're sitting with yourself, when you're listening, like who, not the person that you are because family expects you to do and be this certain way, and so you're being and doing the certain way because you want to please family. Who are you at the core?
Yeah.
And
Who are
if
you actually?
who are you actually? And if you aren't doing that work to be that person, to know that person and to be that person, then you're doing yourself a disservice. And then that's why you can't trust yourself, and that's why you see the danger and the risk, and that's why things aren't aligned. And so that is really kind of the core, the crux of what has to be done.
Yeah. And I would add to that, you know, one of the one of the distinctions with risk and danger. Risk is inherent in living the life that you want. So the life that everybody here, both now and in the future who watches this video, the life that you want involves risk.
All right.
It involves you doing something that might be challenging, right? So challenge is risk.
Mm-hmm.
It involves you doing something that maybe you need to learn a new skill set for, right? And that is risk. But you are not inherently in danger, right? You're not inherently um, in danger of a loss of life, right? A permanent loss of finance, right? And so when we look at what's danger, danger is relative to your capacity and the challenge that you're trying to meet.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was going to buy a lottery ticket and the lottery ticket was $1, Spending $1 is a risk. Every time we spend money is a risk, right? Now, if I only have $1,
Uh-oh. I think LT's Wi-Fi did something.
oh,
Uh-oh, there you are. Okay, you're back. You
my bad.
froze.
Okay.
Yes, you're back.
And so it's relative to your concept of risk and danger is relative to your capacity, right? Your capacity in terms of your ability, your knowledge, your resources
Mhm,
versus the thing that you're trying to do. And sometimes we look at the thing and we don't look at us. We
mhm,
look at the challenge, we look at the opportunity, we look at what's in front of us that we could have, and we don't actually assess how close are we to this thing in reality, you know? And so I think of, again, talking about values, right, and our self perception, I think of myself as a person who I'm great at learning. So anything that I want to figure out how to do, I can figure out how to do it. So in my mind, when I look at something, my ability to learn is going to very often close the gap between what I think might be a risk and what might be danger.
and that's
And
that
so, like,
trust. Yeah,
yes,
trusting yourself.
that's that self trust, and it's also knowing yourself, just like you said, because I have to have seen myself learn things before. I have to have paid attention to what that experience was like and how did I navigate that. And so it does go back 100% to that reflective practice, right,
Mhm.
of sitting in the messiness of things and really seeing yourself for who you are, and then being
Being
able to
that
actually
person.
assess the situation.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I can I'm a bet on myself at 100% because I know me. If I and so I know I can bet on myself. So I agree with that. One of the questions from Evelyn was that not it was about how many people do you think actually are taught this way early in life, like you're not the norm.
Yeah.
I think that it's also generational. Um, because I know LT is younger. Um, LT, I think you are actually my daughter's age. I can't remember exactly. I don't remember exactly how
We're
old.
not going to talk about it on camera, Joe. We're not going.
I wasn't going to put you out there, but I do think you're my daughter's age. I feel like it is something that is happening as a generational shift, and I'm here for it. I love it because that is the one of those first questions where I said we're often so um taught to stick to the script. That is generational, where I feel like the younger people are learning that you don't have to. And it's the harder part for us, this older generation, to make this move. And the blessing for me is to see how younger people are like, no, that's not my ministry. Like I'm moving faster and quicker and shifting. So I think that is part of it as well.
Yeah. So here's my perspective on it. From Evelyn's question. Evelyn, thank you for sharing that in the chat because um, I will say two things about that. I realize that um, I can sound like a bit of a unicorn. I'm aware of that.
Mhm.
Um, but a couple things about that. We need people who are a little different than us, who have had this experience that we sometimes think is so outlandish or so inaccessible. I look at people like that all the time. And
Mhm.
I love watching those stories. I love watching documentaries because there are people who exist in the world as possibility models. And we show up and say, no, there's this other thing over here that you can do. Maybe if you think about it this way, or maybe if you challenge this concept, right, you'll figure out what your path is. And so for me, when I do coaching, I don't coach people to be like me. I coach people on how do you find your lane?
Right.
How do you find what is right, true for you, suitable for you? So I do realize that it sounds like a bit of a unicorn, but we need some of these unicorn stories. We really do. We need the stories of people who I always think about, like athletes are obviously one of the most um, interesting examples, right? It's a very easy example. We need to see people who are willing to put in the 10,000 hours because most of us are not willing to do that.
Mm,
Right. And so that's an example of what excellence might look like, or what opportunity might look like, or what possibility looks like that we have a hand in. So I kind of like talk about my mom and things that she's done, but I could have been a kid that didn't listen. I could have been a kid that said, "Oh no, I'm gonna burn my hand on the stove to make sure it's hot. I want to touch it." I was not personally wired that way, and so that's not the way it went for me. But in hearing those stories, not only do we need the possibility models, um, but our response to it has to be different. And I'm not saying that this is your response. This is the thing that I think about. I think about often how sometimes we hear something and we immediately go, "It don't work that way for me." We immediately, you literally from your spirit reject something that is supposed to be for you.
mm-hmm,
So there is somebody here that I'm supposed to be here to share this with. There is somebody who will be here in the future that this is going to be something that they need. And it might not be the whole talk, right? It might not be the whole hour. It might be one sentence. It might be one thought. And so don't let the fact that my experience sounds a little different deter you from using what you can use now, because everything I'm saying to you can be used now. You can decide now that today is the last day that things in your life exist that way. You can decide right now to sit down and think about, okay, who am I now at this age? And what does it look like for me going forward? And that's anybody at any
mm-hmm.
age, at any time, to be able to do that. And to the point about the generations, that's interesting for me because I know people in other generations will look at our generation and say, "Yeah, y'all do that." But I'm just gonna tell y'all, I don't have other friends who do what I'm doing. And so as much as it seems like, oh, this other generation, you know, y'all, they're doing it, we all have friends who are not.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. We
Absolutely.
all have people. And so one of the things that I think about from a generational perspective of what you might be seeing, there are those of us who watched earlier generations. I talked about people watching earlier. And I watched. That's who I was watching. I watched my peers, but I watched. I'm a millennial, and so I watched Gen Xers. I watched baby boomers. My mother's a baby boomer, and so very closely there were things. I think partly what you're seeing is that we saw there were things that existed in previous generations that we no longer had access to.
Mm,
Right? Pensions being a great example of
mm-hmm.
that disappeared into the abyss for us,
Right.
and I thought I would get at a job and I would work my way up. I would start as some, coordinator, specialist or something, and then I would be VP of something, something. I don't know what, but that was what I saw. That was the trajectory I saw for myself. And, I think a lot of times people see our generation as challenging norms. We have been a generation of perpetual change. We
Mm,
have been a generation that has watched every single structure that we knew either collapse or it is now unrecognized. We do not have a choice.
yeah. I think somebody else called it out too because like we have to I'm Gen X, but as we go back further, we have to also connect to like we can't disconnect any of this from our generational trauma, our history. We can't disconnect the sticking to the script from that because of what were societal norms at that point. But there also has to be an unlearning that you're willing to step into to move into being able to take some of the risk and know that the reward is coming. The unlearning is required. Not everybody is built to do that because sometimes people are just so rigid they refuse to do any of
Mhm.
that. But there is also reward in the risk of unlearning. And that is the beauty of these conversations. That is the beauty of, as you say, people watching. That is like I say, as I share my tiny house journey, there was so much risk, but I'm in the reward. I mean, there's still risk, but I'm in the reward part of it, and I want to share this. I definitely want to share it with the folks who, that have since come back, who thought I needed a place to stay, who have come back to ask, "Can you show me how to, to do this?" But I want to share that with, especially our community, because there's so much reward. Um, Something's happening with your mic. There's so much reward in this risk that is so beneficial for our community. If you think of some of the risk that you've taken, are there one or two, or is there any risk that for you have actually led to the most reward or the most clarity for you?
Moving out of my home state.
Okay.
And that's still a thing that most people don't do. Like most of us
That's and that
stay.
that was so surprising to me how many people hadn't traveled out of their own area. I'm like, what in the entire hell?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, literally, people spend their entire lifetimes. And again, that is not a judgment, that is a statistic.
Yeah.
Most humans, right? And so I would say moving out of state, which I always knew that I wanted to do. And in fact, doing it when I did felt late.
Okay.
And so I share that because even as I talk about, being in alignment with your values and like taking risk and being willing essentially to do the work to get to where you want to be, that doesn't mean that it might not take some time.
Mhm.
And so it was something that I think I held in my heart for a while. Like my family knew. And so when it came around, my mom was like, "No, I knew it was coming. I didn't know when, but I knew it was coming." That was the experience of it. So moving out of state definitely
Okay.
was one of them.
Okay.
And that was a major one because for me, I did not have any family or friends in the state that I was moving to. So when I moved out of state, I really moved alone. I really went and did this thing because that was what I wanted to do, and that was what I believed in doing. And that's what I believe was next for me. Um, the second one, what's another? I mean, I guess I could say becoming a digital nomad.
Okay.
There was a lot that kind of there was just so much that uh, transpired before getting to a couple years ago. I've been a digital nomad for 2 years now. Coming up on that anniversary, actually this month. So May is a lot of things for me. It's my birthday month, but it's a lot of change,
Okay.
a lot of sort of new
My
season.
tiny house too is May. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, May is a great month. May is a great month to make some things happen.
Yeah. Um, it, the funny thing, so I think it was 2010. It was 2010 before I had started my tiny house decision. In October, I had decided I still had an apartment, but in October of that year, I decided I didn't want to do winter anymore. And so I packed up my apartment and I moved to Fort Lauderdale. And I know a soul down in Fort Lauderdale. But I knew I loved the beach down there. And I didn't want to do winter again. And I remember again how so many people, like one friend said that that was very brave. So she was like, "You don't know anybody down there?" And I was like, "No, but I'm gonna be just fine. The beach and the
Yeah,
ocean."
I mean, you can meet people. You'll meet people.
God is down there, and everybody knows I'm an introvert, so it's never really me meeting people. That I know I can go and be by myself, and I'm just gonna be just fine and just happy.
Yeah.
Um, but it is the choosing yourself, and that is the thing that, well, as I talk about tiny house living, it's not just about the space. It's not just about designing. I mean, the downsizing, it's not about the house. A lot of these decisions are about choosing yourself. And I see that reflected in a lot of the choices that you make in moving and pivoting and leaping. I want to go back to something you talked about dreams. And this is something that I don't think it happened in this conversation. I think it was something that either in the message you sent me or something we discussed, you mentioned about dreaming and that you said that you see your dreams as urgent. Can you
Yes.
can you talk more about what that looks like in action, seeing your dreams as urgent?
Yeah. Um, I think you hinted at part of it already, which is a prioritization, right?
Mm,
In terms of prioritizing yourself. And so one of the outcomes of actually prioritizing yourself is you see the things that you want, the things that are um, to you a part of your path, right? Moving out of state was a part of my path. That was something that I always saw as a part of my future. I saw getting to those things as urgent.
mm,
I I was not willing to delay any longer than when it was supposed to occur, right? And so I think in another conversation I talked to you about I'm the person who, if I get a thought or an idea about something, I'm like already at the door, about it. For me, the speed at which I move in terms of moving with urgency is an act of faith. For me, that's one of the ways that I demonstrate it. So I get an idea or um, um, an urge, right, or a push towards something. And in my spirit, in my way of saying, yes, I'm going to do this. Yes, I'm going to move forward is I move. I always say that I don't have any hesitation in me. And so at the moment that I had the idea, I'm probably already researching. I'm already, making notes. And even when I felt like it was time, for a new job, it's not just for things that like becoming a digital nomad, right? Or, getting to your tiny house. It wasn't just that. I had that same sense of urgency about meeting all of my needs. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to shift from putting things on the back burner to saying, and we do say this, but somehow it doesn't translate to everything. We know that life is short. You and I, everyone in this chat, everyone who will watch this video in the future, we all know people who passed away before we ever thought that they would.
oh, absolutely.
We know people who died suddenly. And so we have this concept of understanding that life is short, and yet we're okay with having a dream and it just sits there,
Hmm.
right? Nothing, we don't do anything tactical, right, to move it forward, right? Again, because of fear, because of concerns, because of things that are limitations. I'm a person that's not okay with it. And so I immediately go, okay, what is my portion of this to do? Right. I believe that as I'm walking on a path to do something, right, a thing that I want is in front of me when I wanted to become a digital nomad. Okay, there were things that I needed to do. But then there were things that I prayed about, and I was like, all right, well, that's above my pay grade. You're going to have to, God, that's up to you. So, whatever my portion is to do, I am a person who will do it. And I think we have to develop a bias toward action. We have to develop this perspective that the thing I want in the future is going to take me actively moving toward it.
Hmm.
And so my dreams being urgent, that's what it looks like. It looks like when I get the idea, I go and put it on my calendar. So you should see my calendar. My calendar looks crazy, but it's color coded. It's fully organized. But as soon as I get an idea, right? As soon as I think there's something I'm supposed to be doing, it's on my calendar. It's now a part of something I'm using my time, right, and my energy to invest toward. And I think we need to make more things urgent, not from an anxious standpoint, right? It's only going to happen when it's going to happen. But there's a portion of your time and your energy that you have to contribute to that,
Absolutely.
right? There's a yes that you have to say before you start heading in the direction of that need being met or that curiosity, right? That itch being scratched.
Hmm.
You have to head in that direction.
The thing I learned, because I'm like that as well, LT, like if I decide I'm going to do something, then
It's as good as done.
I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
But what I realized is, and it was learning by conflict that I had with someone, is that that's not what most people do. And for me, it is basically like honoring your word, honoring yourself. I don't believe in lying. Like, lying ain't my thing. So if I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. If that is relative to me, or if that's relative to somebody else, or I'm gonna follow up to provide some. If I can't do it, I'm gonna follow up. What I
Mhm.
learned is that for people who aren't used to moving on their word, or moving on things that they say they're gonna do, when they see somebody else who does, and does consistently, that can raise conflict for them. What I've
Right.
learned through therapy is the conflict that you have with me is
It's
because
about you.
about you, because you see something that's a deficit in yourself, but it
Yep.
becomes a reflection in me because I'm doing the things that I say I'm going to do, and it's
Yeah.
making you feel
A
deficient.
way about you. Yeah.
Making you feel
Yeah.
a way about you. It don't have a damn thing to do with me. But
You looked at yourself and now you looking flaky. You looking real
I
shaky in the light, and I'm looking real sturdy.
I had to learn that I ain't your problem. The fact that I do the things that I say I'm going to do, or I move in a certain way and I'm going to do these things, I'm not your problem. Your problem is you.
Yeah.
And so that kind of goes back to knowing yourself and understanding that conflict is going to arise. People going to fall off. People going to switch. People going to change core people. But oftentimes it is because of the reflection that they see in themselves that's making them uncomfortable.
Yeah, and sometimes people are not, we go on journeys with people, but we're not always in the same place
Hmm.
in terms of our own personal development, right? And so there's this space where we can be traveling together, and I've realized something about me that maybe you are not ready to realize about you, or
Hmm.
you know it about you and you're just not willing to deal with it yet, right? And so that can cause kind of that distance.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that I'm very similar to you with that, Jewel, where I say all the time, I keep the promises that I make to myself.
Hmm.
I keep my promises to other people. If I'm a person who follows through for other people,
Yeah.
that needs to be the same for me. And that's kind of where it extends into seeing, my dreams and seeing things as urgent for myself.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't, I really don't. I'm so serious when I say I don't hesitate. And for me, if I hesitate, then I sit with that.
Right. Because
Hesitation
you
is the thing
know.
that shows up.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm. What led to
Because
that?
it's so
Yeah.
irregular. What is this?
Yeah.
What is this? Is it because I don't really want that? Is it because I'm not addressing something that is actually more of a priority, right? And so this is the things that I work with people on. I think about it in terms of a clarity practice. The things that we're talking about, right? Like being clear, anchored in your values, using it to make decisions. It informs everything that you're doing today and then everything that you're going to continue to do in the future. It is a life skill. It is a life skill to be able to sit and assess where you are and where you want to go and what that means in relation to the environment, right? And that was something that you and I did um, based on how we first met, right? Like the thing we're not talking about.
That
But that
podcast.
was,
Yeah.
yeah, the thing we're not talking about. But we both had to do that, right? We didn't even know each other. And we both met in this place from making a similar set of decisions. We made a similar set of decisions in terms of what's important to us.
Hmm.
And so you meet people as you go along doing the thing that you're already anchored in your values to do.
Absolutely. So let's shift a little bit and talk about um, living with purpose, kind of like what you just were saying about. that thing that we both did that we don't talk about over here.
I haven't actually said it on my channel either.
I talk
Maybe
about
later.
I talk about it in my Patreon community. I talk about it in private spaces, but not out
Uh,
here for the man to be all in my business.
not in these
Um,
streets.
what are some, and I think it was just what we were talking about. Like I feel like it's the segue into it. What are some ways when you said the hesitation, you're sitting with it to analyze that if you do hesitate? What are some ways that you know when something is aligned? Do you follow energy, ease, resistance? Give us some ways that you know when things are aligned.
Yeah. Um, this is this is very specific to me, but I share it because I want people to identify what is specific for them. I am not a big ideas or visionary kind of person.
Okay.
So I'm not the person who's perpetually coming up with something to do, right? Some new idea, some new thing. That's not the way my brain works. Because of 15 years in people development, right? HR talent, organization development, and all of that. I am a person who moves very well between a vision and details, which I know is a thing that people can struggle with. Is like you're either the detail person or you're the big picture
Mhm,
person.
mhm.
But I'm very practiced at moving between those two. Um, and so because of that, I can really identify when something new is presented to me, right? When I do have an idea, I'm almost 9 times out of 10, I'm sure I should be doing it because I'm not really the person who gets the big ideas.
Okay.
And so for me, there's a degree of novelty um, that comes with it. The other thing that I often recognize is it is already in alignment with something that I think or believe.
Okay.
And so when the opportunity for to become a digital nomad came up, it actually originated from a conversation that I was having with my mom that we had had a million times before. So I have a cute little dog. She's not with me right now. She's with her grandma. And I was outside walking the dog. This is when I was living in Orlando and talking to my mom like I usually did when I got off work, and just hanging outside. And she says the same thing that she had been saying for years before. Hey, you made your point. You can move back to Richmond now. I'm my mom's only child, and so she missed her baby. I'm her girl, and that's my girl. That's my favorite, one of my favorite people in the world. And so she said this thing, and I did what I always do, which is I ain't moving back to no Richmond. Like I'll visit, but she ain't coming back. And I said that on and off for years. Now, I should also say that part of this is I went through the pandemic by myself in Orlando.
Mhm.
Okay. And even through all of that time, I said I'm not moving back to Richmond. So when I say I was very clear about the fact that I'm not moving back to Richmond, I've been very clear about that, even when it was a very hard and challenging circumstance. But this particular time, I heard it different. This particular time, I didn't hear move back to Richmond. I heard that, but the next thing that I heard was you can be anywhere else.
Mm.
So I could be anywhere else other than Richmond, but I could also be anywhere else other than Orlando.
Mhm.
My job at the time was it was a full-time job, but it was fully remote, not COVID remote, fully remote. And so there was no that company had no office, not just in Orlando. They had no office in Florida. And so there was no set of circumstances where they would have required me to come back into the office. I was managing a large team at the time. I had like 18 people, and so that I was managing, and the folks that I managed, they lived across the U.S. And so again, there was no reason for me to really be co-located anywhere. They all worked across different states, doing different things, and so I just had this clarity, this sort of moment where I went, oh, I could actually, I don't have to be in Richmond. I don't have to be in Orlando either. I can be anywhere, and it was a global company as well. So they were already established in some of the countries that I like to visit. And so I really could, even with tax implications, I really could be in a lot of places. So there was just this moment where I heard it different. There was just this part of the conversation where I had a sense for a couple years before that, at least a year. I think it was longer, but for at least a year, I had a sense that I would get an opportunity to do something. And I didn't have a sense of whether it was right or wrong. I just had a sense that it would come, and I know what it was, whatever it was.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. Excuse me.
Um, and so it after this conversation, that thing that was just kind of foggy off to the side, opportunity, didn't know what it was, started to make itself more clear. And it was from having that conversation that I've had a million times before.
Thank y'all.
Just saying, bless you in the chat.
The chat.
Y'all are such a good community. Shout out to y'all.
My community is everything. Grace, I saw your Grace, I saw your question asking you where I am and asking me where I am in my house. This is my sunroom, the add-on space, and I'm sitting at my desk, and I specifically, you mentioned my background. I specifically designed this area for knowing that I'll be on lives and Zoom. So thank you. There was some purpose in this as well. Thank you. And thank you.
Intentional.
Intentional.
Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're gonna wrap up this conversation in just a minute because we could go all afternoon. Tell us some things. What anchors you now? Tell us, is it a practice? Do you have a ritual, something that you do? And I heard some of that earlier on. Is there a truth that you carry if and when life starts to feel a little uncertain, or I don't want to use the word chaotic, but a little something?
It does all of the above. I believe in calling a spade a spade.
What is anchoring you?
So what's anchoring me right now is the idea that I'm in the middle of something.
Okay.
I know very much so that where I am right now is like in the midst of something, and whatever's on the other side of it is going to be very interesting to me. I have no clue what's on the other side of it. So as I talk about clarity and alignment and decision making, it is not that you're going to be clear on all the steps in the middle. The clarity looks like the direction you're headed. The clarity is where your North Star is. And so where you are in position to that. And so for me, that's the clarity. The clarity is I'm doing this thing that I had in my heart to want to do. I pay a lot of attention, even as I go through this process, of what works for me, what suits me, what doesn't suit me. I mentioned earlier that I'm in Mexico City. And so I have figured out that Mexico City is a place that I would visit, but Mexico City is not a place that I would live. And that's been in I think, month that I've been here. And so talking about kind of that clarity and alignment and what is anchoring me, it's at this point, it's still about freedom. It's still not going to the grave was good enough, right? Because even at this point, I could very comfortably go, oh, well, let me just pick somewhere, let me just pick somewhere and settle down. Let me just pick that's still not it. So even as you have freedom, it's knowing and having the wherewithal to sit with the thing, to critique the thing, to pay attention to how you experience it. And so my anchors have not changed. What's changed is just what it looks like in the moment. And so in the moment, it looks like me being a digital nomad. In the moment, it looks like I intend to explore more parts of Mexico and to see more things, right? But I also still want to travel, and so that is why I don't have a home or anywhere, in another country right now, because it doesn't quite make sense for me to pick a place yet. And so that what's anchoring me is still what always has been, and that is not going to the grave with good enough. And so I even structure my goals that way. I have goals that I check in with myself um, on a quarterly basis, and all things written out kind of about how I want to develop as a person, and what I want life to look like. And that's my anchor. And so having good personal relationships, um, uh, increasing and broadening my network, because I do like to keep tight, close personal relationships. I have always kind of kept a limit on how much my network is allowed to expand. And so I'm in a place where I'm welcoming that now. And it's just happening, on its own. You and I meeting is a really good example of that, right? Like we just all kind of made a decision. And so I've met people as I'm on my journey, right, of doing the things that I believe in. Um, and business. That's a thing that is new for me because I did not intend to be a small business owner. That was not the original plan. It was something that came to me after I left my full-time job. I literally mean like in my sleep. In my sleep came to me. And so again, I talk about not being, hesitant and acting on things, that come to me as an act of faith. That this is one of the ways that I demonstrate that by moving forward. So my anchors are the same, but in this season of life, they're producing something different.
I love that. One of the things that I'll share in all of that, in the anchoring, also in understanding that there is risk and reward. I have in the listening to where you said there, I've forgotten exactly what you said, but like in the transition, like something is on the way. Um,
I'm in the middle. I'm very much so in the middle.
you're in the middle.
Yeah.
I can I take myself back to October of 2023, and I have been saying, I even said it here on my channel, that I could feel greatness. Greatness was on the way.
Mm,
And I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew greatness was on the way. And at that time, I was in a job that I absolutely hated. And I didn't know what the answer was of how I was getting away from that job. But what I knew was greatness was on the way. And I kept saying that. And I know so much of my greatness has to do with the work that I do within the tiny house movement. Like I'm clear on that is the work that is the gift that God has given me, and that is the work that I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm clear on that part.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just haven't made the connection so that I can quit a full-time job to go do this stuff, and it's going to pay the money that this full-time job was paying. But I knew, I was clear, I could feel it. I felt it, that greatness was on the way. But in the risk, in the risk, in the reward. And so that's what that was my energy, my feeling, that was happening. And it actually even started before October of 2023, but I had this for a while.
Mhm.
And then in my quietness, in my alone time, in my conversation with God, my ask was, God, show me what I'm supposed to be doing. Show me. And I've shared with my community. I was at my other location, and I actually stood outside this door. It was a field in front of me, this great big old field. And I stood outside that door one day, and I was saying, God, like, I know you know how to send notes. I know you. I said, can you burn a bush over here? I literally said this. Can you write me a note in this field of what I'm supposed to be
Burn a bush or ram in the bush.
burn a bush like this? I literally said this. And then on December the 23rd, 1923, the year of our Lord, I was standing right outside there again, bent over playing with a cat, and I started having a stroke.
Wow.
And I was in that, like when I analyzed everything and went back to it, I was in that same space where I'd asked God to show me.
Mhm.
And I had to put all of that together because the risk and the reward, it doesn't always mean it's all going to be pleasantry. It doesn't,
Don't we always make it rosy? Isn't
it's
it
not
always such a
always going to be
nice
pleasant.
path in our mind?
It's not always. Oh, 2023. Thank you, Crystal. I meant to say
We
2023.
knew what you meant. We
Thank
knew.
you, Crystal. Crystal, listen. She knows my new brain. Thank you for clarifying the year 2023 of our Lord.
I knew what you meant, child. I said,
Thank,
no, none
thank
of us were here in 1923.
my Aunt Mary was. So it's not the risk isn't always going to be pleasantry. And I've shared this book that I've read. I read it in San Miguel when I was there in September of last year. Life is in the transition. And it talks about mastering change and how um sometimes that change is going to be unpleasant. And an example years ago, my sister's therapist gave her this example of how a forest fire burns up the forest, is complete devastation. Everything is burnt black, everything. But you go back to that place a little bit later, and everything is lush and green. That black, that's gone. The char, all of that is gone. The risk to get to that greatness, the risk to get to that reward isn't always going to be pleasantry. But you have to trust that on the other side of that, something good can come from this awful thing that you're experiencing right now. And so the good for me is that's how I got out of corporate America. Like in my when I asked to show me, I didn't say, "Can you make this all rosy and show me the good parts and help me win the lottery?" Like I didn't specify how this was going to
Should have
happen.
been more specific, huh, Jewel?
I should have been.
No, I'm kidding.
Perhaps I should have been more specific, and I'm that. But it that did everything that I needed it to do, and I'm okay. Like I've got
Yeah,
I've got some stuff, but I'm okay.
yeah,
And it took me out of a thing that I didn't see that I was gonna come out of in this way.
yeah.
And
And I love what you just put up on the screen with what Traveling Light said, because yeah, it is quite often, we want the money, right? We want the outcome. But quite often, and this is the thing, this is really the thing that I look for, that quite often God is going to give you the tool or the resource
mhm,
get the thing. So if you're talking about, oh, well, I want the home, or I want to be able to live in another country, he's probably giving you some resource, right? Some skill set to be able to then produce the money. So I gave an example earlier about, being in the middle, right? In terms of, and not having intentionally thought that I would leave a full-time job and then become a business owner. Like that just kind of happened later. That was just as you said, in the transition. But I say all the time that if God told me that was going to be a part of the process, that I would have to learn stuff, and a great part of being a business owner is sales. I don't like sales. I love to just talk to people. Like what we're doing right now, this is right up my alley. I love doing this. But I don't want to, pitch and do all of these other things I don't enjoy it. It's necessary, right? And so if he had told me, okay, well, this is the route that you can take, and that there would be experiences in life that I would only learn certain things by going through the experience. Because again, I'm the learn from others person. I'm the person who takes really good notes. I'm the person who doesn't need to put their hand on the stove to figure it out. But that's not life is. Some of it is that. And then the other part is, no, baby, you got to go through this. You have
Because
to have the experience in your
yeah,
bones.
because sometimes even in it's not it won't come to you in the way that you've asked for it. So even in being specific in asking for it, that
It's
might
not the way it was supposed to come.
not
Because we just gonna ask for what we
God
gonna
ain't
ask for what makes us comfortable.
God ain't say, okay, Jules said do this, 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 and this, and I'm gonna do it exactly how she said it.
Right.
You
Like you
you
waving a magic wand or something.
right. It
That ain't the
is
way that works.
you can ask for it, but that might not be the way it's given. And so
Yep.
then it's up to you in how you move from that. And the blessing for me has been so much opportunity from something that could have taken so horribly as major loss. Like there's some physical trauma associated with that. There's some mental change associated with that, but there's so much beauty and so much possibility and opportunity that has also been introduced in that. Okay. What's I always ask this question in your autobiography. If you were to write an autobiography, what would be the
Oh
title
gosh.
of
Don't
your
say that. I already know my mama's gonna watch this and she's gonna be like, see, I've been telling you to write for years. For years. She's an author, like 5, 6, 7 books. And that's her thing. And I've been fighting it the whole time, but I probably will write something. Just don't tell her that I told y'all.
Okay.
Okay. If I were to write something in my autobiography, what's the second part of the question?
What would be
The
the title?
autobiography.
What would be the title of your autobiography?
Oh, what would be the title? At this exact moment, where I am today, I would probably name it failure. I would probably name it failure. There was a part of getting to where I am today where, um, we talked earlier, kind of, joking about me being a unicorn in different ways. But in being that way, I was not personally familiar with failing.
Okay.
I was used to practicing something, right? Studying something and then being able to do it. There's a process of getting good at it, right? Like I'm not number one as soon as I start something, but there's a process. And so I was used to, if I work the process, it works, right? That was just the way that things work. Um, but I have come across some things now where I had to sit with, okay, you worked the process and this thing still didn't work.
Hmm.
And that was like facing failure for the first time. And in a way that I didn't really know what to do with it.
Okay.
And so um, a lot of growth and even still a lot of the questions that I have now, a lot of what I sit with in my quiet time and in my prayer time is, you know, um, we talk about learning lessons, right, from failure. Okay, but you have to actually experience the failure to learn the lesson.
Right.
And we always want to take the positive, which is the lesson, right? And so we
Right.
imagine ourselves on the other side of it. But no, there's some mess to go through in the failure of it. There are some things to face about yourself in the failure of it. And we don't run away with the lesson as soon as the failure is over.
Right. Right.
There is some time that a lot of that can take. And so I am, for me, you're in a position of like looking back, right? And being reflective and saying, like, yeah, I've gotten a lot of beauty out of this. And I'm in the middle. And I'm like, all right, we got to talk on it,
Yeah.
you know? And so I think if I were to write something at this point, it would really be from the perspective of um, relearning myself and learning my capacity
Hmm.
when I face something that looks like failure to me, which is facing something that feels foreign. And that's exactly where a lot of people are. We are facing things that feel foreign to us. And so, what are we going to do, right? What does it look like to be anchored in your values, right? And therefore to have clarity and to be in alignment with those things, right? And to have your goals in alignment. and to still be on this path where failure is a part of it. To face a foreign thing is a part of it. You're in the
Absolutely.
right spot, and
Being
now you have to
part
face
of it.
this. Yeah, yeah.
That reminds me, I haven't read the book, but Pinky Cole, the owner of Slutty Vegan, she has a book, and the title of her book is "I Hope You Fail," because as she's shared her story of having, I think it was a food truck or something, or her first business, and how everything caught on fire, and
Mhm.
so many things that happened in the beginning that I think should have just taken her out, and not and it wasn't setting her up for where she is now. And so that is the title of her book. Again, I haven't read it, but I hope it is "I Hope You Fail." Um,
There's
okay,
something in that.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was saying there's something in that.
Yeah,
There's something in the failure, and again, it's not fast.
yeah.
Not
I
fast.
always in my with talking to my daughter, um, I always talk about. So I'll make up some words, and is like in the failure that hindsight always teaches you, because you have a chance to go back and analyze and do all those things to figure out where you went wrong or how to do this better in the hindsight. And so I was trying to tell her growing up that you have to be able to make it's like retrospect is when you can figure out, in retrospect, I should have
Yeah.
turned left and I turned right.
Mhm.
um, but as she was growing up and I was trying to tell her, you can't always mess up and then get the lesson. You need to have, and I was like, there needs to be a word for it. So I'll still say before spec. Like it needs to be before spec and retrospect. So so in before spec, you can figure out some of the stuff that you would have learned in retrospect, but you're taking the before spec time to figure it out. So that's a word that that she and I use, because you need to sometimes be able to see it up front without having to go through the failure.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the way I kind of live. Like I live in the perspective that there are things I can figure out beforehand,
Yeah.
right? And the reality is that that is true, and more people should engage that as an opportunity, right? But there are parts that are just a part of the experience of your life journey, that everything is not uphill. Everything is not at the summit, right? At the peak of the mountain. There are some things that you will have and do and experience that is in the climb and it's in the valley. And you're going to have to be okay with that because that is the human experience.
And Teresa made a good point, in that, um, she says it takes grace to show other people your personal failures. And I think that's important. As I've shared having a stroke and everything that I've been going through in this process, I've been asked, one of my cousins said, you share a lot of stuff. Um, if there's something that I can share so that it helps somebody not have to experience that same thing,
Yeah.
or help somebody be able to make a decision, a better decision than maybe I made, or know how to, oh, this is what Jewel said, and I know I should choose A instead of B. That is that's what I want to offer. That's what
Yeah.
and there is grace in that. Like, but we're all human. And the thing for me that I learned in this tiny house journey, like years ago, a woman commented on one of my videos to say something like, I could never, I don't have all this money, I could never afford to build this house, or something like that, she said. And I commented and responded to her, and I was like, you don't even know my story. I didn't have all the money in the account to go write a check for this house. You're looking at my story 5, 6 years later. You're looking at my house 5, 6 years later, where over the course of time, it has gotten to this. But that wasn't what it
Right.
was in the beginning. And so you're looking at 5, 10 years into this and making a decision and counting yourself out, versus I'm sharing this journey. I've shared from the beginning how I sat in my house in May to July, and it was hot as hell, and I ain't have any AC because I was out of money. I shared how, and I was hallucinating like it was hot as hell, like where you need to sit still, don't move around because it's too
Yeah.
smooth.
Don't let anything touch. You got to sit there,
Sit still.
keep all your limbs.
I have shared how folks came that they were like, "You too close to not be able to build this. We've seen this. I was out of money, and folks loaned me money." So it is the sharing of that, because you don't want to just, and social media does this. You just get to share the highlight reel, and you don't share the real reel behind it.
Right, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I talked about everything that's happened over the last 5 years, like it sounds cool. I'm a digital nomad. It sounds cool. I'm in Mexico City and spent a month in Portugal and bopped around over here. All that sounds great, but there's still life, right, going on in between there. There's
Yeah.
still questions and challenges and things, that I had going on and even still now, to have to sort through. And that's why I don't position certain things as an answer, right? I don't position it as a solution. I don't position being a small business owner as an answer, right, to the challenges of work. It might be the answer. It also might not be, right? There might be another way to approach based on your personal experience. I don't position being a digital nomad as the answer to if people are experiencing frustration with living in the US, right? We need to get to understand what is specific for you and
Mhm.
what's going to work based on your skill set and your experience.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, we're gonna close out because we could keep talking. LT, tell folks, it'll be down in the description. You all know I always share the information, but tell folks where they can find you and how they can support what you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. So I also have a YouTube channel. It is Pretty Particular, no E. So you can find me on YouTube. I think Jewel probably already has that link.
Mhm.
Um, Instagram, same thing. You all can connect with me up there. I share coaching tips. I also share my traveling experiences, whether it's quick videos or photography. So you will see that from me as well on actually on YouTube and on Instagram. So definitely follow me in those places. I offer coaching, as I mentioned, to Black women who really are looking for clarity and alignment and an action plan. If
Okay.
you can't already tell, I am about getting to the work and getting it done, right? So going from that idea in your head to actually living it and walking that path. Because again, I do think that clarity, right, is a life skill and it's something that you're going to use over and over again. And so I do that work through, I use a tier approach so that people can pick where they are in their journey. And so the first one is the clarity sprint. That's essentially where you're going to develop your own plan, but you need help getting started, right? You've had this thing in your head and you said, look, if I could just get some help getting moving, then I would be much closer to it. And so I work with you then in the clarity sprint to define your goals, to identify roadblocks, and then to help you set your priorities. The next option is to work with me through a coaching experience. That one is more of a complete guidance. That's going to take the clarity sprint and also add in value alignment, where I work with you on that, as well as then developing the action plan together. So you're not only on with that piece. Through that process, I focus on efficiency. So I always want to help you get to what you want in the most effective and efficient way possible. The last one is a much more intensive experience, and it's called an intensive deep dive. So this is a 3 month concierge style, tailor made for transformation. So if you heard my story involves a lot of transformation. And so
Mhm.
quite often that's what I help people to do. And so this is really going from vision setting all the way through to long-term sustainability. It's going to be the coaching experience plus problem solving support. It's also going to be like midpoint check-ins as well as recalibration because sometimes you got to pivot in your pivot and then pivot some more,
Mhm.
as well as having me as a personal accountability partner. One of the benefits of that is, as you can hear from my story, I am a person who is used to doing things differently. And sometimes with our family or with our friends, we don't have that, right? And so with the intensive deep dive, I make sure that you have that direct support. I'm really with you in lockstep as an accountability partner, even between the coaching sessions. And so if any of those things sound like where you are in your journey right now, or it's where you need to be, you can go right to my website, which is PrttyParticular.com. Again, no E. Or you can use the links in the description and you can schedule your first coaching session. When you schedule that, we'll work together to schedule the rest of the coaching sessions. I know summer's coming up. I know people got places to be. So we'll work together on scheduling something that works for you.
All the links are going to be in the video description for people in the future. For y'all folks right now, thank you to the Soul Collective community for sharing in the conversation. I always appreciate you all being here. You make this so much better than it could be. So I appreciate you all. LT, thank you for being in conversation with me this Sunday. I appreciate you. And
Thank you for having me.
absolutely. Good people, I will see you all next Sunday. Um, love you lots. Crystal, thank you as always. Patreon folks, you know, we have our monthly conversation coming up, not not this week, next week, and then the week after that we are in book club. So, and then, you know, Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm sharing some prompts for you all in the community for our conversation. So if you're not in Patreon, join us over there. We're always getting together and got some more stuff going on. So thank y'all very much. Happy Sunday, everybody. LT, hang on for a second. I will see you all next Sunday. Take care, everybody.
Bye, y'all.